And this has been sort of denounced since Adam Smith. So Adam Smith famously said that people of the same profession are usually at each other's throats and relatively infrequently meet in a collegial manner, but when they do, it's almost always in a conspiracy against the public interest. Yeah, right.
Drug cartels cause cartels and they don't collude.
Because they collude within the cartel. The idea is that they could just all be selling on their own, but instead they get together and form a cartel. That's the idea. So the collusion is not legal in the United States, and the reason that collusion is not legal in the United States is that there was a law called the Sherman Antitrust Act passed in the 1890s because people were afraid of the power that companies would have to collude against the public interest. And one example of this was the Standard Oil Corporation, which got together a lot of different oil producers and used that agglomeration to control the political process and the prices in the markets. And this is a famous cartoon that was done by a progressive journalist who was promoting the passage of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Okay, so it used to be not only that cartels were not illegal, but you could actually enforce the cartel agreement. So if someone reneged on the agreement to reduce quantities or increase prices, they could be sent to jail for breaking that. Prior to the Sherman Antitrust Act, and in the EU, this was legal through the 20th century, all the way up until the 80s, when it was made illegal. And in many developing countries, it's still basically legal. So in Peru, it's basically still legal to form cartel. And on the other hand, in the UK, this was illegal all the way back in the 18th century. Luckily, today, the United States is one of the leaders in the world in enforcement against cartels. And explicit agreements to raise prices or reduce service are illegal. This is only true among competitors, only true among people who have the property, that when you raise the price, you increase the quantity of other people's goods. That's a competitor, right? We say someone is a complementer or a collaborator if actually, you need both of the products together in order to get any value, and therefore raising your price would actually reduce the sales to the other firm. Yeah.
Neither party would probably tell them.
Well, there's actually something that's a good point.
Because even if I were trying to collude with you, if you screw me over, I still probably wouldn't tell the government because that would.
That's why there's something called leniency programs. So there's programs which say if you rat out the cartel, you can get a bunch of money. So you both get off, and you can actually get paid by the government for ratting out the cartel. You get a fraction of the amount of money they get from suing the cartel. So in fact, there's this movie called, it's with Matt Damon, I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's all about a guy who went through the leniency program. But he was totally messed up guy, and he was embezzling from the company as well, so he ends up going to jail nonetheless. But it's about a leniency program. So that's a big part of collusion enforcement. So even with, even if you don't communicate, if you're sort of tacitly colluding, you can be prosecuted for that. And your problem set asks you to look at that in the context of auction. You can do either jail time or pay civil penalties for colluding. And when you pay penalties, you actually have to pay much more than the amount of harm that was caused, because they're afraid they won't be able to catch everyone for the reasons that Terrence was saying. So you actually have to pay 3 times the damages caused, because there's only, they think, a 1/3 chance of getting caught. But still, there's tons of cartels caught every year. About 1,000 different companies either pay large penalties or go to jail every year for being involved in collusion. And this creates large practical challenges in trying to run a cartel these days, and makes it, collusion possible only in limited settings. So the basic problem that you have to deal with in a cartel is that you guys as a cartel are trying to basically, catch all the people who might be cheating on the, before we even get there, cartel is beneficial to everyone involved, but every individual firm is going to have an incentive to betray the cartel. And Vidur,
Yep.
why will every firm have an incentive to betray the cartel?
Because then it can capture like the market, the business that was lower.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in some sense, the very nature of the cartel is to internalize externalities, right? And it wouldn't be an externality if you didn't have an incentive to do something differently than what they want you to do, right? By reducing price or increasing the production, each firm would benefit, right? They can steal business from the other firm. Now, the more ambitious a cartel is, the bigger these incentives are going to be. So in other words, the more the cartel tries to restrict production or raise prices, the bigger our individual firm's incentive is going to be to betray the cartel. And Matt, why do you think that's the case?
Because the more ambitious it is, the higher you're able to, the more you're able to reduce quantity, the higher you're able to raise prices. If you steal even a fraction of that market at high quantity, at high prices, it's more profit that you can make.
Exactly. Or if it's at a high, yeah, exactly. If you have, if you increase quantity by a bit, you're going to gain more if the price is high. If the price is high, if you undercut the price by a little bit, you'll make more profits, right? Okay, so near the competitive level, there's little or no incentive to cheat. And thus the extent of collusion that you're able to sustain depends on your ability to effectively deter cheating. Because the more collusion you have, the more incentives there are to cheat. So the more you're able to deter cheating, the more collusion you're able to create. So every cartel is going to have to need to create the expectations that people who defect from the cartel will be punished. And all the policy is about the interplay between this. It's sort of like the cartel is trying to make sure nobody cheats against the cartel, and the government is trying to encourage people to cheat against the cartel. The cartel is trying to catch the cheaters against it, and the government's trying to catch the cartel. So it's like a little fun game. The goal of the cartel is to ensure that the cheaters will credibly be punished, and the competition agency is trying, and as well as the customers of the cartel, are trying to catch the cartel and prevent it, and so therefore trying to encourage people to cheat. And Stigler's theory of oligopoly is all based on this back and forth between the government and the cartel. So in order for a cartel to deter cheating, what does it have to be able to do, Ishan?
Well, I guess like the firms in the cartel must be really clear about the agreements, what they have to do and stick to agreements.
Yeah, exactly. It's a pretty complicated process, right? First, the cartel has to figure out what it wants to agree on in the first place, right? So that was what I think Matt was saying before. No, who is? I forgot who was saying before, but you have to get together, or maybe Vidur, you have to get together all this information to even figure out what you want to be producing, right? To even figure out what the right agreement is. It's just like any other externality problem. You need to get together and collect all this information, figure out who's doing what to what else. That's really hard when the government makes it illegal for you to talk to each other. And illegal for any communication to go back and forth. So it makes the information problem much worse. And second, you have to be clear about what constitutes cheating and what doesn't constitute cheating. Because it's only possible to enforce rules if it's clear what the rules are, right? But on the other hand, a cartel would be really stupid if it was completely inflexible. Because if one firm suddenly gets some great new technology and it's not able to introduce that into the market, but that would be seen as violating the agreement, that would be really bad. So it both has to allow flexibility, but if it allows too much flexibility, that will give people an opportunity to cheat. So it's got that problem, right? Third, if the firm has to be able to detect cheating, right? It has to be able to tell the difference between just, one firm got really lucky and got some really big contract, and they were cheating and offering a lower price to that firm that they weren't supposed to be offering, right? Yeah, Mike?
Why would any firm have an incentive to enter a cartel if they're like the marginal firms? They benefit from like the distortions of the price of quantity just by the making outside of the cartel.
Absolutely. That's a great and very, very famous point. So what Mike said is exactly a big restraint on the ability to form a cartel. So this is again exactly what we were saying. If the cartel tries to have a higher price, then there's going to be more incentive to free ride on the cartel. But if the cartel doesn't have that higher price, right, then the other firm might enter it if that allows the price to rise by some. So the possibility that firms like leave the cartel is exactly going to be a restraint on how high the price can be. But if the cartel can punish people who aren't a member of the cartel somehow, then that, so it's the same sort of a dynamic. But that's a very good point. So they also have to have a cost-effective way of punishing, right? If it's really costly to everyone in the cartel to punish, then they're not going to do it, right? The ideal thing would be if you could tax one member, if you could put a fine on someone for violating the cartel agreement, and then give it to the other people in the cartel. That would make it really cheap to enforce. One way to do this potentially is by saying, hey, if you produced more today, then we're going to reduce your quota of production in the future to punish you. Because that's a really efficient way to punish. It doesn't require a giant price war where everyone reduces their prices and therefore it hurts everyone in the industry. And they have to be able to enforce really quickly against people, right? Because if they wait a long time, then someone will say, hey, I'm just going to cheat because they're not going to catch me for a long time, and I might as well make the profits in the meantime, right? So Stigler pointed out that there are a lot of different factors that help determine whether an industry is conducive to collusion or not, based on how easy it is for the firm to achieve all these goals that it has to do, and these firms to achieve all these goals that it has to do to form a cartel. So, Connie, what are some of the factors that Stigler highlighted as being important for determining whether collusion is possible?
I think he says how easy it is for firms to track each other's prices.
Yeah. That's one of the most important factors that he emphasizes, absolutely. So he says that transparency of prices. So if I can see the prices that you're charging, that makes it much easier for us to collude. If I have no idea what price you offered, or you can offer a secret discount to some customer, then it's very hard for me to punish you. I notice that I got less demand, but that could be just because I got unlucky, or it could be because you cheated on the agreement, right? Another thing is that it's, if there are large and heterogeneous buyers, that can be really hard for a cartel. Because imagine there's like one big buyer. That big buyer can go to each of the members of the potential cartel and say, hey, if you break up this cartel, I'm going to give you this big prize you're going to be able to supply to me, right? On the other hand, if there are, small buyers who are all very similar, it's very easy for us sort of to divide up territory. So each of us gets a chunk, right? Yeah.
Is this related to the capitalization of the
The what?
licensing?
Oh, doctor licensing.
Because since the consumers are heterogeneous and politically confused, they can...
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely an example of that. Another example of that is, heterogeneity of the products makes it very hard to collude. Because if the products are all very similar, I can say, well, you have this share of the market, you have that share of the market. But if we have these very heterogeneous products, it's like, what does it even mean to have shares of the market? If my product's selling for a high price, your product's selling for a low price, I don't even know what it costs you to produce. It's very hard to figure out what the agreement should be, or to figure out what it means that someone's cheating on it. Concentration of the